All right, so you can share your screen.
Okay, thanks.
Benny, we have a message from the chat. Says she couldn't hear the audio. It may be on the Facebook Live or YouTube.
Okay, I'm honestly not sure how to fix that. Any ideas?
Could we ask what platform she's on? Are you on Zoom, Facebook, or anything like that? Which platform are you on?
Okay, I'll ask her. I'm pretty sure she is because she's one of my students. And I gave her the registration link. So let's see. Is it just Samantha, or has anybody else said anything about not hearing?
Dr. Nikki Demania as well.
Huh.
People are saying they can hear fine. Oh, Dr. D says he can hear us well. Oh, she can hear now.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay. I was worried there was some kind of issue with like all of the attendees. That was going to be a nightmare. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and start, right? Okay, so let me start by first just introducing myself and kind of why we're here today. So my name is Laura Lewis. I'm one of the librarians on campus at BC, and I have been working really closely with the SGA on providing workshops for students to get ready to vote in this election. So there's a lot of different really confusing things that are going on right now. So earlier at 1, we kind of broke down some of those things in our first workshop, and we kind of talked about how you can vote and how you can register if you miss the deadline on the 19th, like that kind of stuff. And then in this workshop, we're going to be focusing exclusively on how you can avoid fake news regarding the election. So we're going to be talking a lot about propaganda and how you can kind of be a more savvy online user and how you can kind of just ignore all of the bad things that are online, and so you know what to trust and what not to trust. So the SGA is here with me today, and so they're helping me out, and I really appreciate it, and it's been a lot of fun. There are some workshops next week that I'll be talking about at the end, so make sure you stay tuned for that, because all of you might really want to learn about the ballot measures and things like that that are going to be going on next week. So, okay, so now that that is out of the way, oops. Let me present. Okay, so there's a few things with this election that it's different. And so this is your first time voting, or if you voted before and you're not sure what to expect this time, there are 5 things that we can downright know what is going to happen in this election. We can expect that voting is going to take more time and preparation than usual. So that it comes into like voting by mail and all of the different things that go into that. We can also expect to fact check everything that you hear, even from people that you trust. So if you have spent any time online in the past couple of months, especially in the last few weeks, you have probably noticed a lot of anger and vitriol and all this stuff like just about the election. And there's so many different things that are being said, and it's hard to know what you should trust and what you shouldn't. And so with these two things, is what we're going to focus on in this workshop. So let's kind of talk about the guide that I have. So there is a guide. I'm going to share it in the chat box so that everyone has it. And the stuff that we learn here today, and there we go. So the stuff that we learned here today, and then some of the other stuff that we talked about in our earlier workshop, as well as the information about next week, all of this is on this guide. So I highly recommend that you kind of copy and paste this and maybe bookmark it on your device. I think it might come in handy for you. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to define fake news. We have to start there at the beginning. And then we're going to talk a little bit about propaganda and bias and how you know what it is and how you can identify it. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some tricks that fake news makers like to play. And then we'll end with online resources and what you can do as a consumer. Okay, so let's start with defining fake news. Okay, so we've all heard it about 1 million times, and to tell you the truth, I am sure all of you are probably sick of hearing fake news this and fake news that. But it is important to understand what that even means, because the unfortunate thing is that it's kind of become misshapen, and because people use it so much, the meaning of the word has been lost. And so sometimes people will say you're fake news just because they disagree with you. And so I think that it's better to know the more precise definitions, because then that will help us know what it is and what it isn't. So let me start with the most general term, misinformation. So the thing to remember here is that can be any false information. Now, it can be a mistake and it can be completely intended. So it doesn't matter about the intent. It can just be a mistake that a journalist put in their story. Maybe they misquoted someone on accident, or maybe they got the date and time wrong of something. But it can also be very insidious and something that someone has done on purpose. Now, disinformation, that's kind of where we really talk about intent. So misinformation can mean anything, but disinformation is only when it is done on purpose. So when we say disinformation, we mean stuff that people are trying to put to trick people and try to cause chaos, especially when it comes to the election, or maybe they're just trying to make money. There's lots of different purposes and reasons why it's done. So disinformation really is about that type of fake news that is done on purpose. So one of the things that's really important to know about misinformation is that it's everywhere online. And the very nature of how we live online is kind of made misinformation more potent. So there's something that's called the illusory truth effect. That's a fancy word, but honestly what it means is that the more you see a lie repeated, the more likely you're going to think it's plausible. Now, here's where social media comes into play and being online. You see a lot of misinformation all the time. And it's the same pieces of the misinformation over and over and over again. And when you're in this environment, it's very easy for you to kind of start to blend what is reality and what is false and lies. And so it's easier online for us to believe in these things because we see it everywhere. And so that's kind of the danger of living online and living in social media and all that we do in 2020. It kind of just makes it worse, to tell you the truth. So one of the things that's really helpful to have knowledge of is bias. And what I mean by that is it's helpful to kind of be able to detect bias when you're reading it, because there's sometimes it can slip through and you don't realize at the time that you're reading something that contains very biased language or a very biased point of view. So there's 3 things to look for anytime you're reading a social media post or any kind of online article. You want to look for loaded language, direct tone, and if it's favoring one side or point of view. So let's break that down a little bit. Okay, so loaded language. When you use something that's loaded, it means like emotionally. It has a negative connotation to it. So words matter and precise words matter. So for example, if I wrote a story and I said, the politician slithered to the podium and screeched out her beliefs. Those 2 words, that conveys a really negative emotion, right? I'm comparing them to a snake with slithered, and then I'm saying that they screeched. Screeched is very different than spoke. Talk is very different than lecture, right? Those words, they matter. And so word choices can really lead you to feel one way or the other. And they can be a way for a writer to convey their emotions when they shouldn't be. So the next thing is direct tone. And that is hard to really pick up when you're reading something. Now, if it's in person, you can hear it in the tone of their voice. So if I said, oh my God, Benny is so nice, right? He's so annoying. By the sound of my voice, Benny, I don't think you're annoying. I just saw your picture, sorry. But you get my point, right? You heard it in my voice. But how do you do that if it's in writing and you're reading it? Well, it comes down to noticing the details. So look for informal language, all caps, exclamation points, and unnecessary quotation marks. All of those mean something. So we'll get into an example in just a second if you're a little confused. The next thing is favoring one side or point of view. So the thing is that when it comes to news reporting, it should be from a neutral point of view. So if you're in the position where you're having to tell facts, especially as a journalist or me as a professor or a librarian, I need to tell it in a neutral way, meaning my opinion doesn't belong here. What I need to teach you today is the facts, right? And same thing with journalists. It should be the who, what, why, when, where, all that good stuff. There should be nothing where, they tell you what side or whatever they're on. Now, if they are only focusing on one side, so let's say it has to do with the debate that's tomorrow, and the writer is only focusing on one political candidate and completely ignores the other, that's favoring one side. It should present both as equally. So let's look at some examples here. So loaded language, let's start there. Notice in this news article, notice it uses the word spitefully. That's an adjective. You don't have to say spitefully. You can just say Graham blames Dims for his support. You don't have to say Graham spitefully blames Dims for his support. That is an opinion. It's an adjective, and it shouldn't be there. So it is telling you their opinion. They think Graham was spiteful. Not that it is. You can think the opposite way. So that word should not be there. Okay, so let's kind of compare. Okay, so these are both about the same event. And notice one says, tolerant liberals commit full-on assault when Trump supporter stands by her views. Let's start there. There's a few things with this. It's very different than the one on the right. First of all, tolerant supporters. There's quotation marks there. Why? It's not a quote. There's no person being named. It doesn't say, so-and-so says tolerant liberals. So when there's no clue that says it's coming from an actual person who's saying this, that means those quotes are being used sarcastically. So if I said, again, Benny, I'm picking on you, Benny is so nice. Do I think Benny is nice? No, I don't think Benny is nice at all. And I'm conveying that by using these little air quotes. That's what they're doing here, but in
That
writing.
hurts.
Sorry, Benny. Again, I'm seeing your picture, so that's what I'm going with. Anyway, I think you're very nice. Anyway, they don't think liberals are tolerant. Not at all here. So that's one. Two, commit full-on assault. Let's take a step back here. First of all, when this story was written, the facts were still being gathered. So notice how on the one on the right, it says, woman says she was attacked for saying she supports Trump. And then it has a colon, and then it says police. So what that writer is saying is that the police said that there is a woman who is stating that she was attacked for being a Trump supporter. Notice how different that is from saying tolerant liberals committed full-on assault. That definitely conveys an emotion here. Not to mention it ends with Trump supporter stands by her views. That makes her very, sorry, the board just like went right out of my head, but sympathetic. There we go. It makes her very sympathetic, right? Man, she was just standing for her views and then she was attacked like that? What's wrong with those liberals? We don't know that happened. We don't know the full story. This is bias at plain and simple. Okay, so what else can you look for? So we've already talked about loaded language. Also look for the word I. It does not belong in a news article at all unless it's a quote. If it's a direct quote, okay, fine. If it is the author using the word I, no, shouldn't be that unless it's an opinion piece. But if it is just telling the who, what, where, when, why of what happened, there shouldn't be an I in there. Also, like we talked about, exclamation points, but we also want to focus on means, gifs, and gifs. So you might see that a lot online. And when it comes to actual journalism and finding news sources, you really don't want them in your news sources. Now, I know they're everywhere on BuzzFeed, and BuzzFeed, like, that's fun. You don't read BuzzFeed to look at the news. You read it because you want to like play the quiz or you want to know like all the hot gossip that's going on. But when it comes to like straight up journalism, you don't want to see things. Let's see. Here it is. There we go. Do you see it where it says lovely? That does not belong in a news article at all. That is not professional, and it's conveying sarcasm, and it's conveying an opinion by the writer. Furthermore, if we go back up to the headline, let's stop there. Disgusting, unhinged leftists use children to make foul-mouthed anti-Trump video. I'm just reading it how I think the writer wants me to. He's using all caps, foul-mouthed. You know this writer's opinion, and he wants you to know it. He's not trying to hide it at all. This is clearly biased. Okay. So we've got the basics down, but I hate to tell you this, there's more. There's a lot more, and the plot thickens. So when it comes to elections, especially, you need to understand propaganda and what that is. So there's two quotes that I pulled because I really like them, especially when it comes to 2020. Excuse me. So it says, propaganda is a form of information that panders to our insecurities and our anxieties. Oh, I love that. It really does. And then propaganda is indifferent to truth and truthfulness, knowledge and understanding. It is a form of strategic communication that uses any means to accomplish its ends. If those two don't sum up 2020, I don't know what does in terms of our politics. We're all anxious and insecure, and it's played upon time and time again online. And politics has this thing where it will do whatever it takes to get votes and to get whatever. It's a very toxic environment that we live in these days. And so propaganda is being used as kind of a weapon. It always has been. I'm sure you learned about it when you learned about World War II. And sometimes it can be used for good, and sometimes it can be used for bad. So understanding that it exists and knowing how to recognize it is just critical with being an online user. So I talked about it being used for good, but sometimes it's just kind of used, not necessarily a bad thing, but it's used for money because advertisers use it all the time. So if you have ever watched a commercial and you're like, damn, I gotta buy me some Nikes, I'm gonna do that right now, then you've fallen prey to propaganda. They use like your wants and your emotions against you. They want you to go to Burger King or go to Starbucks, and they're trying to appeal to certain things, which we'll talk about in just a second. Also, it's a little trickier because advocacy groups use it all the time. And some of these you may agree with, like the anti-smoking campaign. That's pretty strong imagery. I know it's like being blocked, but that's like somebody that's on, like a gurney that has died. That, I mean, immediately like, whoa, that catches your attention, right? And it's for a good cause because we all know that smoking does kill. It's also been used for the Black Lives Matter movement. Personally, I think this one definitely hits me right in the gut every single time. And it's even used for things like the Second Amendment and, pro-gun rights and things like that. They're used effectively and they're used often. Of course, get to the other end and get from political candidates. It's always been a part of the election. Having a slogan, putting out these advertisements, attacking your opponents, that has been there from the beginning, for sure. But it has definitely become a little bit more toxic in recent years, and I would argue especially in 2020. And then, here's the other thing. It can be disguised as just a news source. Now, if you're on Facebook or if you're on Twitter or whatever, I have seen these ads for propositions time and time and time again. They are texting me, they are emailing me. It's everywhere. These are all ads and they're coming from one singular point of view. And the pictures that they're using and the words that they're using all have purpose. They want you to agree with them. So what can you do? Well, you can understand the techniques, and there's several. So those of you that are in my class, write these down. And those of you that are just watching because you want to be here, you should probably still write it down. But okay, so what are some common propaganda techniques? Well, activating strong emotions. They want you to feel something immediately. Responding to your needs and values. Does it quite effectively all the time. Simplifying information and ideas. From this point on, this is where we get into the not so great parts of propaganda, because this is where we get into the dangerous part. Simplifying information and ideas, attacking opponents, and misinformation. The simplifying and the misinformation are the two ones we need to worry about. So let's see some examples. Okay, this has to do with COVID. Very potent imagery going on here. Clearly, they want you to think that wearing a mask is somehow like you're being a puppet. And so, I mean, it really kind of like, whoa, that's deep when you see it. Or you're like, oh, that's not great, whichever way you feel. But it definitely hits something in you. And then responding to needs and values everywhere. So we've seen a few when it comes to the advertising ones and the advocacy, but here it can be done in a very, well, I want to call this subtle, but making out our president to be kind of like Superman, that's kind of responding to our needs and values in the sense like Superman's our hero, right? So they want you to see our president as a hero. He's here to save us, right? And then, of course, we have attacking opponents. So Biden for resident, making it seem like he's elderly and should be in a old folks home. Crooked Hillary being like a puppet. Then there's, for our president, it says American Idiot. If you don't know, that's a famous album from the early 2000s by Green Day. And then like, there's some that they just go right out and say it. Weak, frightened, impotent. There's no subtext. There's no image here that you can guess what they're saying. They're just going right at it and saying what they mean. There's no subtlety whatsoever in that one. Then let's get to this one. What technique do you think is being used here? So hang on just one second. And I'm going to try to do a poll. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'd like to try. Okay. So I'm going to put this in the chat box. So if you can, click on the link. Now, if you're on your phone or something and this is going to mess up your connection, don't worry about it. It's not that important. But if you can, I'd like to see it, what you think. So let's see here. Okay, so we've got an activating strong emotions, and it looks like only one person has voted. Oh, we got another one. Oh, okay, so we're in a tie. Okay, this is kind of what I wanted. Oh, activating strong emotions is ahead. Ooh, okay, yeah, simplify. Oh, yeah, we've got some different ones going on here. Here's what I think. I think this kind of bleeds into multiple different ones. I definitely think there's a healthy dose of nostalgia going on here. And I think that has to do with responding to needs and values for sure. But I also think that it activates strong emotions. It's making you remember like, oh man, I remember when I was with my dad or, with someone I loved, and it kind of makes you feel all warm and kind of fuzzy inside. So it's definitely doing a couple different things there. So that was good. So thank you guys for doing that. I appreciate it. I'm glad it worked. Okay, so now that you know some of the tricks, what do you do? What do you do with that? Well, you're going to watch out for them. And every time you see a piece of media, what you should be doing is you should be asking yourself several questions. Who is the author? What is their purpose here? What are they trying to do? What techniques are they using? How are they trying to get my attention? What lifestyles, values, or points of view are being represented here? Though we can definitely, with the last one, we could definitely brainstorm that if we had the time, for sure. How might different people interpret the message? That's an important thing to remember. You might see something in a way that another person doesn't. It all hits us differently. And then what is omitted from this message? Oh, that's the key, right? Because when it comes to propaganda, it's showing you one side and it wants you to believe in that side. And so you don't get both views when it comes to that. And so that's where fake news and propaganda go hand in hand. So here are some tricks. So we know that there's different techniques that can be used to get our attention and to get us on one side or the other. We've already established that. But there are some tricks that go hand in hand with propaganda and with just fake news in general that are used all the time. And one is incorrect context or incorrect correlation. So let me explain what I mean by that. So when it comes to context, you can take a photo, a quote, piece of video, and you can change it to whatever you want it to say these days. I can take a photo that means for point A, and I'll make it to mean point B instead. You can use people's words against them. You can use images against them. That's just how it is in the online world that we live in. Let's talk about correlation though. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so let's use an example here. It's summertime. Let's go back to summer. Here's one point. People eat more ice cream during the summer. Point A. Point B. There are more drowning and boating accidents in the summer. That's point B. Incorrect correlation would be if I said, well, people eat more ice cream and then there's a ton of boating accidents and drownings. Ice cream is the cause. Ice cream is what is killing people in the summer. Stay away from ice cream. What? Just because two things exist and they're true doesn't mean that they have anything to do with each other. We eat ice cream in the summer because it's hot and we like it. And we go swimming more and boating more in the summer because it's hot. It doesn't mean one is causing the other. Now, it seems really simple there, and you're like, well, duh, Professor Lewis, what the heck? Hello, I'm not stupid. Of course you're not. But that's just a really, really simple example. We'll look into one in just a second. It's a little bit harder to detect. So this is covering incorrect context here. So like this thing right here with Oprah Winfrey, they're clearly taking a quote from her completely out of context. And they're saying, oh, she said this, that means she takes part in child molestation. Again, that quote could have nothing to do with that. And you're completely stripping all the context. Now, even online, things like Facebook, they're actually trying to do a little bit better job of catching these. So you might see things that say missing context right underneath the photo or the story. And so Facebook is telling you, hey, there's more to the story here. Now, the fortunate thing is that they tend to be a little late. And usually the damage is already done because it's already been shared like a buttload of times before they put that on there. But it's important to realize that when it comes to like the celebrity is a fan of this particular candidate, that could be true, but it could also be completely taken out of context. So let's talk about correlation, because honestly, I think that's where the confusion is going to lie. Just take a second and look at this. Okay. So we have two maps, and one is saying 5G rollout map. And then the other one is talking about coronavirus cases. And if we look, the shaded areas are the same in both maps. So along with this photo, the stories that were circulating online were 5G towers are causing coronavirus. Why? Because if you look at these two maps, they're the same shaded areas. So that means wherever a 5G tower goes, that's where people are getting COVID. 5G is to blame. But let's actually break this down a little bit. What do 5G and coronavirus have in common? People. The more people there are, the more populated an area is, the more towers are going to be needed because people are on their phones. And the more COVID is going to be around because COVID loves people and it likes to spread to other people. So they're both shaded in the same areas because that's where people live. So of course they're going to match up, but that doesn't mean that they're connected or one is causing the other. So they're always a slippery slope. So if ever you see something and your instinct is like, oh my God, I didn't think about it that way. That's crazy. Take a second, start doing some critical thinking, say, wait a second, how do I know this is true here? Why? And sometimes as soon as you start thinking about it, it starts to break down immediately. And we'll see that in later examples. So let's look at another trick, a patina of credibility. Again, another really fancy word. All it means is that it looks and feels like it could be true. It has a veneer of truth. You want to be fancy. And what that means is that they're using some kind of prop or name or something to make it look believable. And usually what ends up happening is it will like say that it's from a doctor or some kind of healthcare professional, or maybe it's from some kind of expert. They say it's from that, but we don't really know. So let's look at this one right here. Okay, it says, what happens when you wear a face mask? Now there's a couple of things here. First, I would argue it's very clean cut. It looks nicely done. It looks like a nice graphic. And then, of course, more importantly, if we look at the bottom, it says it's from a doctor. And so all of this is telling you like why wearing a face mask is dangerous. But if we stop and we think and we start breaking each one of these down, we'll start thinking that there's holes in here. Some of these aren't necessarily true, or some of these are being taken out of context. So they use that all the time. They use some kind of sense of authority to make you feel like, oh, I should trust this because it's from a doctor, or it's from an expert. That means I should automatically not think about it and trust everything it says. But we don't know if this was really from a doctor or not. Anybody can say that they're a doctor. And when we look at all of these different things that they're saying, a lot of them are really like taken out of context or just outright false about wearing a mask. Okay, so another one, manipulated to alter the meaning. This is a big one when it comes to 2020, because it has gotten quite sophisticated on how things can be manipulated. I'm talking about photos, quotes, of course, but most importantly, videos. Let's look at the photo example. Biden was not at a casino, and this is clearly a photoshopped picture. So when it comes to that, when it comes to Photoshop, a lot of times we can kind of see it immediately. Some are better than others. But what about videos? Okay, there's a little bit of cursing in this. I'm going to try to pause it before the cursing hits. But if something gets through, I apologize. Just be on your guard. Of course, there's an ad.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there because then he really starts cursing. Okay, so that is not really former President Obama. He did not say that. Jordan Peele is saying that. But the way it can be edited and the way it can be used in today's technology, it can make it seem like Obama is saying things that he's never said before. But all they take is an audio file from something Obama has said, and then they're taking what Peele is saying, and then they're putting the two together. And so it really makes it seem like former President Obama is saying these things when he didn't. This may not seem scary to you, but think about it. Because honestly, this scares, excuse me, I'm going to curse this scares the holy crap out of me. They can literally take any video of someone, twist it around, and make that person say whatever they want to say. That's scary, and that has really scary implications. Now, one of the things that you should probably notice if you haven't already is the mouth area. It's gotten better, but if you notice the mouth seems kind of off when he's talking, that's like a really big clue that it's a deep fake. That's kind of what they're called. That's kind of like the popular term is deep fake. But it's something that we kind of need to pay attention to and be careful with. Okay, let's get on to simplifying information and ideas. Okay, this is a big one. What ends up happening is that propaganda, fake news, both, they will take a complex idea and they will chip away at it and chip away and chip away and make it so it's completely simplified or sanitized to the point where the entire meaning could possibly change. And you're like, what the heck is she talking about? So let's look at an example here. So let's look at this post right here. So it's saying that, okay, Jefferson Davis, he was a Democrat and he fought for slavery in the Civil War. FDR, he was a Democrat and he put Japanese Americans in internment camps. Biden, he's a Democrat and he wrote the '94 crime bill, which incarcerated a lot of Black Americans. And then finally, there's a picture of Trump and it says, yet Republicans are the racists. Now, first of all, I'm neutral, baby. I am not taking a side on this one way or the other. I am looking from a neutral point of view here. So here's the thing. If you've ever taken a history class, let's start with the top one. you know that Democrats and Republicans are dramatically different back then than they are today. In fact, they've almost completely reversed. The thing though is that they're taking context out of that. So yes, Jefferson Davis was a Democrat, that's true, absolutely. But his ideologies and beliefs don't really align with either party today because it was back in the Civil War. And then of course, yes, FDR, I'm not gonna lie on that, that is true. He absolutely did Japanese internment camps, it's awful. But however, they're taking these things, these real low points in America, and they're trying to tie it all together under one thing. But all of these things are complicated and they all have long stories and lots of discussion about each one. And it's simplifying all of them into one graphic. And that's the issue here. Whether you agree or you disagree, that doesn't necessarily matter here. What matters is that you see with this example that they're cherry picking information and they're simplifying it into something where all complexity is gone and the meaning is no longer the same, if that makes sense. And it's done all the time. So let's take a look at this one. This is another one. I'm going to go ahead and say it. They are simplifying information here. So it's again about masks. And it's saying, hey, in these countries, women wear face coverings their entire lives, and yet the country is still reporting COVID. And so it said, think, America, think. So of course, the implication here is that COVID masks is not a big deal. We shouldn't wear masks. It makes no difference. Something along those lines. But here's the thing. Let's actually stop and think about it. Do men in those countries wear face coverings? Do all of those do all of those countries wear the same face coverings? No, they're dramatically different. They're comparing countries that they shouldn't be comparing. Every country is different. Men don't wear the face coverings like that in different countries for sure. And then of course, do they wear them when they go to sleep? So there's so many things that they're completely leaving. They're not mentioning all of these things that we can just come up with right on the spot. As soon as we think 1 second about this, it starts crumbling. Okay, so what can you do? Well, there's a few things. Simply knowing these tricks and knowing propaganda techniques, just knowing that's going to help you identify it. But here are 3 things that you can do to help you even further. And one is taking a look at your own news environment. Where are you getting your news from? Are you just getting it from social media? Are you maybe getting it just from one app? Maybe you have one subscription to one newspaper and that's all your news is from there. Maybe you're not reading news at all and you're just looking at the feeds and you're seeing what people say. All kinds of different reasons. And all of that has different implications. The problem with just getting your news, though, with social media or from one place is that you're leaving yourself open to only getting one perspective. And it's playing right into your own bias. And you heard that right. We all have bias. Now, some students, they're kind of surprised because they think, oh, I'm not biased. That's a mean thing to say. Why would you say that to me? But as human beings, the truth is, we're all biased. We all have something called confirmation bias. That's one of them. And that really comes into play. And confirmation bias is where we tend to read news that we already agree with. Because if you have ever read a piece of news that you disagree with, oh man, it's hard to read. You kind of want to stop every time, oh, are they crazy? No, that's not true. And you get angrier and angrier. It's not a pleasant experience. So if we're kind of left to our own devices and we're not thinking about it, we're definitely going to read the news that we agree with because it's safer and easier to read. So I'm not saying that this is something that you're doing on purpose. It's something that you don't know you're doing at all, but you're drawn to just because you're a human. And that's just how it goes. Knowing though, that confirmation bias exists and that you could be falling prey to it, again, good first step. And so what you want to do is you want to try to get news from different places and different perspectives. So if you just get it from one source, you could leave yourself open to your own bias, and whoever's writing it could be biased. So getting multiple perspectives and reading different stories on the same event, it can really help you out. Next thing, I'm going to go ahead and say it. You might consider not getting your news from social media. I know a lot of people do, and if my niece is here, she's going to kill me for saying this, but she likes to get her news from social media. And we kind of had a conversation about it. And I can't blame her because it's a really easy way to get it. And to tell you the truth, I do have news stories that pop up on my feed too. So it's fine to have that. But if you only rely on that, I would say that that is leaving yourself open to fake news, propaganda, all kinds of bias that you might not pick up on. Of course, you're more savvy now because you attended this, but it's still important to be aware of where you're getting your news sources from. So if you're still pro getting your news from social media, it's okay. But at least be aware of it and try, when you see something, try to fact check it. So let's talk about that a little bit before we end. Okay, so checking for loaded language, fact checking, all very, very important. Also, looking for evidence. If you see any kind of claim being made, you need to know where that claim is coming from and how it's true. So there should be links to other outside sources. There should be quotes from witnesses, experts, what have you. But there should be some kind of evidence present that you can click on or that you can read so that you can see where this information is coming from. It's very important. So let's talk about evidence. Okay, so I said that you should see something. So make sure that there are like hyperlinks in the story, and those hyperlinks, it's important that you actually read those. I know that's not what you want to hear, that nobody wants, but it's really important to follow up. So you're clicking on these links, actually read what they go to, because often they'll go to something that's not corroborating their story. They're just hoping you don't read it. But by linking it, they want to trick you into thinking, oh, it's okay, they're providing a link here. So make sure it's actually linking to maybe like a study or an outside article. It's important that it's outside. So it's not from within the same website. It's taking you to an outside website. Like I said, it's important to get those differing perspectives. It's also important to just maybe do some Google searches and saying, okay, so I'm getting this here, but I want to see if other news outlets are reporting on something similar here. That's especially important when it comes to the election, because some sources are more biased than others. There's definitely a lot of that going around online, so it's important to get those multiple perspectives. So fact checking, what can you do, or what's out there to help you? There's several different organizations and websites that are there to help you fact check. Snopes and PolitiFact is something that I use all the time. I also use fact check, all three of those. And I like to use all of them so that I can double check the fact checkers, because I want to make sure that I'm really getting the good stuff. I'm really getting the truth here. And so you don't have to do that. You don't have to be crazy like me, but you can maybe look at all of these and say, okay, which one do I think has the best evidence? Which one works for me? Which one do I like? And you can maybe lean on one or maybe two. There's also sites that help you check media bias. And so we're going to talk about media bias fact check, and then we'll talk a little bit about Snopes and PolitiFact, and then I'll stop talking. I promise. Okay, so how can you find information on Snopes and PolitiFact? The good news is that they're very easy to find information about. And so this article right here is an example. So this is talking about Planned Parenthood and Satanists team up to promote abortion. And so, wait, is this true? Well, let's fact check it, right? So we're going to go to Snopes. And here's the important thing. Some of you may be tempted to just copy and paste the headline, and sometimes that might work. But other times, in fact, most times, it won't. Trust me, I've been there. I've done it during a presentation, and then it didn't work, and then I was like super embarrassed. So it's really important to use keywords. So here I'm using Planned Parenthood and Satan. And so what you're going to do is you're going to click enter or click that little magnifying glass thing. And then it'll show you some results. You click on the one that you think is right. So you click on that title. And then what you're going to see is you're going to see an article. And at the top, it's going to have something really important. It's going to have a rating. So it'll say true, false, mostly true, mostly false. Sometimes it'll say taken out of context, that kind of thing. And so in this case, it's false. Now, some of you may be tempted to just stop there, but I would always recommend that you actually do the reading and you see where are they getting this from? How do they know it's false? I want to see a paper trail here. And they will often, they'll include the origin, and then they will include how they fact checked and where, they get their information from. So it's really good that you look at that. Now, I think PolitiFact is even better about showing their work than Snopes is. So PolitiFact is, I think, a really highly trusted source, but of course you should do your own searching for sure. But it's this kind of same idea. The only thing is that you'll have to kind of go over here and kind of click. There it goes. And then it pops up for you instead of being right up there. And then again, you'll try to put in, I'm just going to put in Planned Parenthood. I think that's what works. It'll show you some results. Okay, let's try Satan too. Here it is. So you might have to play around with your keywords a little bit. If it doesn't come up right away, try putting in another keyword. Okay, and then again, we have a different rating system here, but same idea. It's saying that it's false. And then it gives a really extensive breakdown. So that's where I think finding the site that works for you or using multiple sites really can be helpful. All right, so let's talk quickly about the media bias fact check. So media bias fact check is a little bit different because it's not looking at the actual facts and claims made in the article. Instead, it's focusing on the news organization itself. And so when you're using this one, instead of typing in stuff from the headline or the title, you're going to type in the news organization. So like this one, this is from InfoWars, or you might type in CNN or New York Times, Washington Post, something like that. So we're going to click on it and we're going to type in InfoWars. And again, there's like a little search thing. And I've done this search a lot of times, so that's why they keep popping up. Here it is. And there's a couple things you want to pay immediate attention to. The first one being this little box right here. It has from factual reporting all the way to very low. You want to see high, very, very high, maybe mostly factual, but honestly, you want to focus on the top, really. So very low, that's all the way at the bottom. That is not good. Now, in terms of being a college student, very high is probably what you should shoot for, but definitely don't go lower than high. High or very high, that's what you want to stick with if you're using some kind of news source. So if it says very low or mixed, low, things like that, that's not good, especially for a college level paper or research, for sure. This also kind of is gauging it in terms of conspiracy theories. Now, that's not every site. It depends on the news organization, but this one just happens to really, really heavily focus on conspiracy theories. So what it's doing is it's putting it on a scale for you. And so from mild all the way to tinfoil hat or quackery. And so tinfoil hat, that's like, you're really out there with your conspiracy theory. Like aliens come down and like they abduct people every day, or things like that. So this is getting into tinfoil hat. This is strong pseudoscience. That means science that's not necessarily based in regular science, but more kind of based on other things. It's kind of hard to describe. Sorry, my brain went kind of blank there, but that's not good. And so then it also says it's very low, But the thing that I like personally is that it gives a history. It tells you who the news organization is funded by, super important. And then it kind of gives you stories that they have been known to have like false stories or bias. And so like some of the famous conspiracy theories from InfoWars is like 9/11 was an inside job, and some of these other ones like Pizzagate, if you heard of that before. Another big one is Sandy Hook, and he's gotten into a lot of, the man, Alex Jones, he is the one in charge of InfoWars. He has gotten sued quite a bit because he believes that Sandy Hook was fake and that all the parents are actors and they didn't really lose their children. So he's like in a lot of legal trouble at the moment. So anyway, that kind of gives you that important context. So you may be tempted to just kind of focus up at the top, but honestly, take the extra work and look at this detailed report, because you always want to see, you want to see the work. You want to see how they're getting this information, why they're saying it's very low, why. Okay. All right, so now's the point where I kind of am winding down. And of course, I have to plug our other workshops. So we've got 2 next week. One is at 1 p.m. and it's how to vote safely. And then another one is at 6, and that one is understanding the ballot measures. So that's a big one, because I've already voted, but my husband and I spent like an hour or 2 hours just trying to figure out some of these dang ballot measures. They're really complicated. So if you haven't voted yet and you're still, you kind of want to wait to vote, come by. You'll trust me, you will get a lot out of it, because just hearing about it and kind of hearing people talk about it really, really helps. Okay, so plug over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I know I was talking quite a bit. So are there any kind of questions? Is there anything that anyone would like me to kind of go over a little bit again? Feel free to use the chat box, or if you would like, Benny, can they talk on the mic, or is just use the chat box? He might be on another, he's doing like 3 workshops at once on here. So feel free to just use the chat box and see if you can use the mic if you so choose. If you don't, I completely understand.
They would be able to use the chat box, or if you want to hover over their names, you could allow them to talk temporarily.
Okay, so how about this? Go ahead and put it in the chat box, and if you want to talk, I'll give you the option. And that way, I don't want to put anybody on the spot here, because I don't want to be mean. But I do see, it says, is nostalgia an emotion? Yeah, I think it can definitely be an emotion, for sure. If you've ever seen something and you're like, it just kind of hits you right in the feels, like, oh man, that brings me back. It is definitely an emotion. Sometimes it's not even something you see, but the other day it was something I smelled. Yeah, I know what it was. It was like an orange smell. And my grandmother used to love orange slices, those candied orange candies. And like, it just hit me, and all I could think about was my grandmother, and she's passed away a long time ago. But like, I was just flooded with just nostalgia for her, and remembering like going into her room and stealing her orange slices when she wasn't looking. So yeah, I would say for sure that nostalgia can definitely be an emotion. But that is a really good point. Anything else? Ooh, wistfulness. Oh, that's like an A+ word right there. Yeah, for sure. You know what? Now that you said that, yeah, I would agree with that. That's a great word choice right there. Don't be shy. Feel free to put it in the chat box. I'm not going to force you, of course, but we don't bite. We love questions. Okay, so it's looking like I think everybody's feeling pretty good. Nobody's putting in the chat box. Vice President McNellis, is there something that you'd kind of like to share at the end? I want to make sure that we kind of all get our say. If you want to plug more details.
You basically covered it all. I'm glad you had that extra plug slide for us. I appreciate that. Yeah, Laura will be with us also on those future webinars as well. So we've got our expert with us. So I'm really looking forward to those. So I hope you can all make make it to those as well. And I'd just like to thank you all for coming, and taking the time out of your Wednesday night to be here with us and become an educated voter. We appreciate it.
We actually got a really good question or something down in the chat box. It's talking about not sure how to explain some news sources to my family members, how to get news that has bias and help their nuance. Oh man, that is something that I've been struggling with for a while. For sure. Yeah. And it is when you see something that is fake, it's so hard to be like, dude, that's fake, man. You don't necessarily like want to be mean about it. And because if you immediately call them out on it, that person's going to get 1, embarrassed, and 2, angry. And when you're embarrassed and you're angry, you're not going to listen. You're immediately going to put that wall down and you're going to say, hey, I'm not listening to a word you say. I'm right and you're wrong. And that's just kind of human nature. So this is kind of what I've been doing. And I've only done it a couple of times because honestly, it's not my thing to sit there and like insert, like, oh, that's wrong. Like, I don't like doing that. It makes me very uncomfortable. But I have done it a couple of times. And what I have done is I have privately messaged the person. And I said it in like this. I said, hey, I was doing some research because I saw your post and I wanted to learn more about it. And when I did, I kind of found this. Here's a link to the source I saw. And leave it there and see if they respond. Now, I did it twice. One time, she responded back to me. She's like, thank you for letting me know. I did not see that. And she removed the post. That was so awesome. And like, we were cool about it. And then we kind of started talking about like, friend stuff, work stuff, that kind of thing. And so it was totally cool. The second time, they ignored me. And so that might happen. But I think what we need to remember, though, is that we do it with kindness and understanding. Because if we immediately start getting angry or frustrated or call them out, no one's going to listen to that. Because you're not going to listen to somebody who's like getting on to you about it, right? And so if you do it in a way that kind of respects them and says it in a way that you're like, hey, I found this out, as opposed to like, dude, you wrong. You need to remove this. I think that kind of helps. Personally, I don't know if that really helps you much because that doesn't really solve the problem like, Thanksgiving and Christmas when conversation around the dinner table. But in terms of online, that's kind of what I found that I do. Is there anybody else that's done anything? Like you can put it in the chat box if there's something that you've done that was successful. Yeah, I definitely don't have all the answers, but that's just kind of something that I kind of fumbled my way onto of doing. Okay, so Dr. Damani, did that kind of help? I hope it did. I'm sorry if it didn't. It's like really tricky stuff. I would also add, try to always use sources. Always back yourself up with evidence, for sure. Sometimes though that doesn't work. They don't look at your evidence, but try. Okay, anything else? Oh, yeah. So in the comment box saying like, hopefully everyone's Thanksgiving dinners go smoothly after yeah, I certainly hope so. And just in regards to, COVID, that we're all safe and we, spend time with our family, but in a safe way. So definitely. Oh, okay. So somebody says very interesting. I like to hear that. Thank you. Keep it coming. Just kidding. All right, that's great. So I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. You probably might be tired and wanting to get off this and stop hearing me talk. So unless there's any more questions or comments, I think we're ready to wrap up. Okay, I think we're good to go.